strong.
Chapter 171, Hyotsuka. Ye Fusion's eyes seemed to penetrate the thick fog. When he saw the scene behind the fog, he suddenly showed a strange expression on his face and shouted, "Be careful." When his voice fell, he saw thousands of arrows screaming and covering the sky. This rain of arrows drowned the sky and shot them. Suddenly, every figure rose into the air. Next to Qianyang, Zhao Shi Tong and others stepped out. Jiani broke the void, and the axe destroyed everything, blocking the arrows that came from the shot. Go, Qianyang said loudly. His body rushed forward. The strong people of all parties accelerated at the same time. His body was lightning fast. In front of Ye Fusion, the Black Wind Eagle's wings stirred, turning into a terrifying storm that swept arrows, while carrying Ye Fusion towards the gate in front of them. They walked through the fog to the ruins, and a huge armor came before them. This army is endless, and there is no end to it. Go to the soldier's grave. At this moment, a voice came out. The speaker was a sharp young man beside the saint. Ye Fusion's eyes lit up and he ordered the Black Wind Eagle to follow behind the saint and the others. They may be more than just entering into this ruin for the first time. Where? The endless and mighty army didn't look like real people at all, but as if it had life, it launched a direct attack on them. Boom! A terrifying atmosphere covered the sky, and the troops below sent spells and headed straight for the crowd above the sky. The beautiful eyes of the first girl, Lan Langxiu, looked down, and the silver eyes released a terrifying light, and the endless arrows froze in the void. On Ye Fusion's side, the black wind carving continued to speed wind blades downwards, but the arrows from the army did not run out. Yanqing Mo continued, the sword light shone, turning into a rain of swords, covering the surrounding space, protecting the black wind carving. Keep forward. Ancient city. Ye Fusion looked up and looked ahead. This ancient ruins of Lulan turned out to be a mysterious ancient city. What's even more terrifying is that the entire ancient city is arranged like a huge super array, as if it were real. He walked far ahead. Ye Fusion found that there were endless figures in the ancient city under the sky, and there were strong people everywhere. This is a formation, Ye Fusion said, and it was a very powerful array, covering a city. They walked inside and entered the array. Ye Fusion looked at the crowd. The soldiers wearing silver armor were released from the low-level laws, but in the silver armor troops, several generals wearing gold armor could be faintly seen. This is the intermediate level method phase level. This huge array has divided the troops in the ancient city into kingdom levels. Lu Langxiu led the way, people followed behind, and the speed of the group was extremely fast. Down below, sometimes there are troops that kill in the void. Faxiang is at the top level, and the people below can't stop them from moving forward. Only, Ye Fusion guessed that there must be a stronger existence in these ruins. After a while, they arrived at a place where many golden armored generals guarded them, and even the existence of purple gold armor, their breath was a high-level law. Kill. Beside Lu Langxiu, the sharp man stepped forward, and the far face appeared behind him, and a terrible storm came. Within the storm, there were countless spears that pierced the air, crushing and killing those who were crazy. Armored General. The rest of the people began to attack, and the space was really hard, and everyone who was here was immediately destroyed. In front of the pagoda, a tower appeared. This pagoda is solemn, with a mysterious atmosphere inside. In the area around the pagoda, there were many suspended magic instruments. Bingsu. Ye Fusion's eyes lit up. This pagoda is Bingsu. The instruments here are yours as long as you can pick them up, Lu Langxiu said. The surrounding space was large, many instruments released their brilliance, and everyone's eyes looked towards the instruments, ready to choose. It is said that the Lulan ancient ruins artifacts are very difficult to take, and they are right in front of you, but you can't take them. The magical weapon contains the prince's will. To take it, it must be strong enough. As soon as Zhao Ha stepped in, he walked straight towards the sword. This sword blooms with golden light, giving people a very sharp feeling, which reflects the human face in the sword. Mine. Zhao Ha stepped up, with a terrible sword meaning. He walked in front of the sword, grabbed his palm towards it. But at this moment, the sword erupted with astonishing sword intent. This sword intent could destroy everything, and it was indestructible. Just for a moment, Zhao Ha snorted, his body exploded, and then he vomited blood and turned pale. Everyone was staring at him. How could the Lulan ancient ruin artifact be so easy to obtain? If they can be easily retrieved, there will be no artifacts in the ancient ruins. What happened? Qian Yang asked Zhao Ha, although he had asked for some news, but it was also the first time he stepped into the ancient ruins of Lulan. The sword seems to have life, come back to me. Zhao Ha said palely. Behind, Ye Fusion's eyes stared at the pieces of art in front of him, and he could see very freely. Each of these artifacts contained a terrifying resolve within them, as if they were sealed within an artifact. It will, I'm afraid this is the prince's wish. There was another figure stepped out, a strong man at the Yunshao mountain gate. When he stepped out, he was bathed in a terrifying thunderlight, and when his palm stretched out, his palm contained a terrifying thunder power. Holding his palm, he grabbed the lightning hammer. His entire body was filled with purple light, which was extremely overbearing. The terrifying power of thunder exploded and was swept away in the void. The palm of the Yunxiu Shinman powerhouse contained a terrifying thunder force, and the palm of his hand was firmly suppressed. But at this moment, a terrifying thunder force rushed into the arm of the strong man of the Yunshao mountain gate, and then ran through the opponent's body furiously, and his terrifying will contradicted it. With a groan, he practiced thunder and was struck by lightning and lightning. His body was black and fell into the sky. That's very sad. Several people advanced one after another, none of them succeeded, all of them failed. The ancient ruins have existed for many years. As long as the instruments here are still around, it means that their predecessors have not done so, and it is impossible to easily pick them up. Gao Lulanzu looked at all of these things calmly. During the visit to the ancient ruins of Lulan, the prince artifacts stored here still can't find their descendants. Ye Fusion, didn't you try it? Qian Yang looked at Ye Fusion and said. Young league leader, please first. Qian Yang stepped out, his luck broke, and he jumped up to tens of feet. Wang Hu's luck, dazzling, instantly attracted a lot of attention. Qian Shao will win the magic weapon, Zhao Ha said. I'll try it for you. Qian Qianyang said, then stepped forward, towards the golden sword that Zhao Ha wanted to catch earlier. Wang Hao Qiyun turned into a true dragon to surround his body, and the dragon claw took the sword. On the sword, a burst of swordsmanship erupted, ignoring the power of Qiyun, and instantly storming into Qianyang's mind. Qianyang Qiyun returned, with a very terrible will, closed his eyes and faced the sword. The two seemed to be involved in an invisible confrontation. On Qianyang, a terrifying sword flowed through his body, and he sent out a sharp whistling sound. His will is like fighting with this sword. Fierce battle. Zhao Ha and the others all stared at Qianyang. After a while, Qianyang broke out in sweat and kept dripping down his cheeks. Oh! For a while, Jianyi whistled past, Qianyang's body continued to recede, Jianyi disappeared, returned to the sword, and a voice came out, sometime. Everyone heard the sound of his eyes flashing, and looking at the swords one after another, the swords can still make sounds. Who is talking? Qianyang was sweating on his forehead at this time, his face was a little pale, and he failed. The sword prince is indestructible, and weapons are chosen to be taken down. Qianyang's eyes had a serious meaning. The instruments here contain life. Instruments exist. For the sword, the prince will live by the sword, and it will last forever. If you want to get a magic weapon, you have to recognize it. Ye Fusion has been watching quietly, he has also seen, as Qianyang said, these Tezuka armaments are actually those who choose to inherit. I'll give it a try. Ye Fusion said. He walked forward, his eyes fell on the fire stick, and he stepped forward, the palm of his hand appeared a very hot fire, grasping towards the fire stick. Graduated. First tier realm. People's eyes flashed, and they looked at Ye Fusion in surprise. This person is the one who stood next to the girl and stood next to the girl that day, the level is very low. When Ye Fusion's palm grabbed the fire stick, an extremely violent fire will instantly entered his mind, and the power of terror seemed to burn him directly. Ye Fusion let go of his hand instantly, stepped back, he stared at the fire stick in front. Can Lady Lulan be? At this time, a voice came out, and Lu Langxiu took a step forward, saying, yes. I saw that at this time, beside the fire stick, there was a ghost image that was changed by will. This ghost image burned the fire and saw it appear, and everyone's eyes froze. Why doesn't this become ridiculous? People from the first stage of the Fa phase also enter the ancient ruins to pick up tools. The figure of fire said to Lady Lulan, looking very dissatisfied. Lu Lanzumi's eyes glanced at Ye Fusion, she didn't know Ye Fusion's level was so low. Is a generation worse than a generation? Is there anyone else to try? This figure glanced and looked at other humanities. The will of a person in the legal state of the first level of the legal realm cannot withstand his will, and the peak of the law is almost reluctant. There he is. Application. Chapter 172, Busybody. Ye Fusion looked at the figure with a hint of gloom, but he was insulted by the remnants of desire. In that case, don't bother the seniors. Ye Fusion smiled, then walked away. I'm coming. At this time, a voice came out, and someone suddenly stepped forward, but the strong person of Yuncheng Yanzong, which he mastered, was fire. I saw that his body was bathed in flames, and his eyebrows seemed to have flame marks on them, and his palms were raised directly towards the fire stick in front. Suddenly a figure of fire entered the scepter, and instantly a terrifying fiery flame broke out. Yanzong's strong brow mark looked bright, turning into a very strong fire will, the prince's will, and the aura of the heavens and earth around him rushed into his eyebrows frantically. The mark became brighter and brighter, like a field of fire like. The two have been at a stalemate for a long time, and a long voice came out, only you, I don't want to wait, I hope you don't embarrass my weapon, I will accompany you one last time in the ruins. How much desire to shoot can be continued, it's up to you, out of the ruins, you can only rely on your own strength to motivate the power of the instrument. Thank you, seniors. Yanzong's strong eyes showed excitement. He was the first to receive the prince's instrument of will. With the help of this instrument, he was able to condense the prince's will. The pure and strong will of fire forges the will of the moderate prince. Coupled with the enhancement of this instrument, it will be able to explode very strongly, especially in the ruins. The other party can help it. Many people glanced at Ye Fusion, thinking that it is really beyond their power to dare to step into the ancient ruins in the first order law field. At the same time, when they saw the strong man Yanzong get the weapon, the others tried it, but failed one by one. But at this time, the sound of exclamation came out, and I saw the direction somewhere, and several figures were recognized by the instrument almost at the same time. That's them. The eyes of the people flashed, and the four mysterious people. At this time, 3 people had caught the magic weapon that contained the will of the prince, and even the eyes of the beautiful woman Lu Langxiu revealed a strange light. When the latter obtained the magic weapon, the 4 immediately left, leaving the people here without a glance. Sir. At this time, the bright young man next to Lu Langxiu said to Lu Langxiu, these people are from a deserted city. They are interested in the ancient ruins, and there may be some variables. Lu Langxiu's eyes flashed, and she naturally saw it. The 4 people from the deserted city were terrible. They were all probably top-tier troops. Now they are interested in the ancient ruins of Lulan. Go out and trade with Lulan. At this time, Ye Wuchen went somewhere in the void, and in front of him, he had a sword. The sword was silver, and the silver light that was blooming sharply dimmed. Ye's eyes were as clear as a sword, and his body was instantly wrapped in the sword will, and the sword will was released, wrapped in the direction of the silver sword. For a moment, the silver sword erupted into a dazzling sword light, and the terrifying kendo would pierce straight into Ye Wuchen's mind, as if to kill him. Yan Ye's dustless eyes have extremely sharp eyes, and the heart of the sword is blooming in his brows. He was against the sword of the sword and wanted to rush to his sword. Chi-Chi, a terrifying sword intent swept across the void in an instant, enveloping Ye Wuchen's body in it. Kendo was about to reveal the meaning of killing, as if to destroy Ye Wuchen's will. Ye Wuchen didn't seem to feel it. His body seemed to turn into a sword body. Endless kendo would pass through his body. At this moment, it seems that he is no longer a flesh body but a sword body. This body is not only back, but instead goes forward. Chi. A sharp and loud sound came out, and Ye Wuchen's mouth was bleeding, as if to warn him at last. Ye Wuchen closed his eyes. He could feel the sword facing himself, as if he would end his life at any moment. At this moment, in his perception, Ye Wuchen also turned into a sword, facing the sword in front. Go like resonate with him. The 2 swords collided with each other, and the sword that was transformed by Ye Wuchen appeared cracked and slightly broken, but the broken sword merged into another sword, immortal and immortal. The sword screamed loudly and generously. Then, Ye Wuchen was held in the palm of his hand, and the sword would fuse with Ye Wuchen's will. He made it. Everyone blinked, looking at Ye Wuchen. Qianyang's eyes flashed a strange light. He invited Ye Fusion and others to come, and he appreciated the performance of the 3 Ye Fusion in front of the Wanghao grottos. Can they defeat the Wanghao caves, or can they defeat the Wanghao magic instruments? Now it turned out that he was right. Ye Wuchen got the magic weapon. He and Zhao Ha unsuccessfully tried to get the sword. Although they are not the same sword, it can be seen from this that Ye Wuchen's company will be recognized by the sword. Ye Fusion saw Ye Wuchen holding the sword in the void, and there was a smile in his eyes, and he couldn't fall behind. Raising his steps, Ye Fusion came to a place behind Bingzhao. There is a Guqin in front of him, a dragon faint. He stepped forward and stood in front of the Guqin, and then fingered the strings. There was a terrible piano sound that exploded in Ye Fusion's mind and trembled in the eardrums of the people around him, but Ye Fusion's will attack was stronger. The sound of the strings when the strings are plucked is like the sound of a dragon. Longyun is hidden in Gukun. Ye Fusion's eyes shone. See, Ye Fusion's fingers once again hit the lower string, and the sound of the dragon Yin trembled between the heavens and the earth again, and this time the desire in Ye Fusion's mind was stronger, like a kind of counterattack. Stop it. A cold voice came out. Ye Fusion looked up, and then on the fire stick in Yan Zong's strong hand, a deliberate vision appeared again, and the fire figure stared at Ye Fusion and opened coldly. Don't touch the piano. Why? Ye Fusion looked to the other side with a flash of his eyes. He wouldn't let himself touch her. After all, he is the will of the scepter and magic weapon. Now, when he chooses another magic instrument, he should also care. There is no excuse, let you stop and stop. The figure of fire responded indifferently, appearing to be extremely powerful. Ye Fusion looked at the other party, then lowered his head, and struck the strings again, as if the original Yin dragon came out, shaking in the heavens and the earth, and the will was swept away again. Gukun has no consciousness, but only the purest will, which has been completely integrated into the Gukun. This piano, I want it. Ye Fusion looked at the figure of the flame, and said lightly. You can't stand it. The fire figure spoke coldly, as if he really cared about this piano, and didn't want Ye Fusion to be embarrassed by it. Is that true? Ye Fusion smirked, fingering the strings, the sound kept coming out, just like Kangshan Longyin, a very strong willpower kept bursting into Ye Fusion's mind. The figure of the fire looked at him coldly, and the First Order French Empire dared to use this piano to kill him. Ye Fusion didn't know the other party's thoughts, and he was still playing. In his mind, the piano music he played continued to eat him, turning into an attack of bad desire, Longyin destroying everything. This piano is like not allowing other people to play. However, he didn't believe it and continued to play. The Yin dragon's voice is getting more and more terrifying. He wants to destroy his will, the imperial will to guard him, and at this moment he ignores everything and just keeps on strumming the strings. His body is filled with an overwhelming breath. Kangshan Longyin, continuous music, everyone around him looked at Ye Fusion, listening to him play this song. The fire figure frowned, seeing Qin Yin becoming more and more domineering, but Ye Fusion remained indifferent, and a faint flash of light flashed in his eyes. Can he really resurrect this piano? However, with his territory, how could he endure the backlash from this piano? On the ancient Gukun, with Ye Fusion's playing, the dim light gradually shone, the sound of the piano became more and more terrifying, and the light on the Gukun became more and more bright. Accompanying the extremely high-pitched dragon screaming in the heavens and the earth, the sound of the piano shining brightly, the bright sound of the piano ringing through the heavens and the earth, and many instruments screaming, as if affected by the sound of the piano. At this moment, Ye Fusion clearly felt that something was broken in the Gukun. This Gukun is so dazzling that his wish can finally be directly inserted into the Gukun, no longer has the power of backwash. In addition, he felt that Gukun had a very strong will, as if attached to Gukun, like a fire figure attached to a scepter. I saw this scene, the fire figure looks very ugly. Ye Fusion really woke up the piano. In his eyes, a terrifying flame was released, which was branded directly on Ye Fusion, terrifying. Emperor Ye Fusion intruded directly into the Gukun, then plucked the strings. A terrifying high-pitched sound sounded like thunder, as if a real dragon was born, colliding with the fiery will of the attack, and smashed it head-on. Vibrated even more, as if led by the sound of a piano. The fire figure looked cold, and the will attacked again. Ye Fusion sank into the Gukun without looking at it. He hit the strings again, and the louder sound of the piano shattered everything, erasing the attack on his will. Seeing that everyone around the scene stared at Ye Fusion, he even got a magic weapon, and it seemed to be very powerful. Ye Fusion relied on the power of the magic weapon to directly counter the willpower of the fire stick. What made them confused was why this fire figure had to stop Ye Fusion, and what exactly was the origin of this ancient piano. Finally, the flame figure did not continue to shoot. He looked at Ye Fusion and said coldly, "You can get this harp, this is your chance to make it. In the ruins, if I find that you have humiliated the harp, I will definitely kill you." Ye Fusion looked at the other side indifferently. When he tried to communicate with the other party, he was immediately rejected. He was considered too low. Now he got Gukun, he is nosy. Chapter 173, U2. Ye Fusion continued to play. He felt the presence of the remaining will on the piano, and wanted to wake him up. For the rest of my life, I glanced at the disappearing flame figure, then stepped outside and walked towards the magic weapon. It was a huge axe, the golden axe was full of sharpness, and it had a strong weight, like it could cut through everything. Before that, Shi Tong of Qianmeng land wanted this giant axe, but failed. For the rest of his life, Ji Yu directly stretched out his hand and held the hilt of the axe. Soon, the sharp will invade into the mind of the rest of his life. He seemed to see a beam of an axe, and it was cut as he wished. He screamed for the rest of his life, and his will was growing wildly, but a voice sounded in his mind, "You are too weak." His cultivation is the same as Ye Fusion's, and he only has a first-rate realism state, which is much lower than the previous Shi Tong. In his mind, the will seemed to have turned into a terrible demon, filled with an extremely wild atmosphere. The demon-like figure looked at the will of the giant axe, and said indifferently for the rest of his life, "Follow me." Everyone around him looked at the rest of his life in shock. This guy has a hole in his head. Choosing a master requires a test of will. He was better, and he immediately asked, "If you want to follow me, who do you think he is?" However, for the rest of his life, his will is far less than this giant axe. This is the will of the prince, how can it be compared? But what about the prince? He chooses another magic instrument without following it. What the fire stick said to Ye Fusion just now made him angry. See, Ye Fu's divine selection instrument was actually left behind. Now the will of this instrument has the same tendency, because that is the case, he immediately asks, does not follow, changes if he does not follow, is too lazy to face the other party, he does not need the other party to admit it. He was the instrument he chose, and he couldn't choose it. The giant axe will feel the ghost of the will in his mind for a lifetime, then the light of the axe gradually dissipates, lying quietly in the hands of the rest of his life. The rest of his life instantly withdrew his hand and walked back with a large axe. Everyone was dumbfounded when they saw the scene. Is this okay? Zhan Shitong's face was a little unsightly. The big axe was valued by him and rejected by the will of the axe. Now, for the rest of his life, the will of the axe did not resist, which made him feel humiliated. Zhao Han's face was just as ugly when he saw the scene. He stepped out and walked towards the golden sword again, holding his palm, a mighty one was about to explode. Zhao Ha shouted, "Do you want to follow me?" The surrounding people looked at Zhao Ha one after another. Sword seemed to be stunned, the light of the will stagnates, and the next moment, a more terrifying will broke out, and a cold voice came out, "Are you seeking death?" The words fell, Zhao Ha screamed, his body broke, and when he saw the pain, he was clearly hit by the will of the sword. Liu Yusheng glanced at Zhao Ha indifferently, others looked strange, Lin Yao couldn't help but smile, and even the black wind eagle made a strange laugh, flapping its wings. Did this idiot think he was the rest of his life? Zhao Ha is gradually recovering, his face is ugly, how will he do it for the rest of his life? Is he stronger? However, his realm was clearly higher than the rest of his life, and his will was definitely stronger. Qian Yang next to Zhao Ha did not smile. He invited Ye Fusion to the ruins that day, only to see the tenacity of their will. Now the three have been recognized by the magic weapon and the prince's weapon, but he is 1,000 leagues. The young confederate of the land didn't even get the acknowledgement of the magical instrument. Ye Fusion, who was now familiar with Guqin, was stunned and looked at the rest of his life now. In the Guqin, the will was awakened, but it was silent, there was no sound, and Ye Fusion did not say anything. Zilin Yao and Yanqing Mo both tried and failed to gain recognition from the instrument. See, Ye Fusion thought, what if he took another instrument? Will the magic weapon resist it? However, he did not make such an effort. Otherwise, if he succeeded, he would be surrounded by everyone. However, these people did not have any magic weapons. He can take 2 pieces, can he continue to take it? I'm afraid that everyone will look at him and look for him. Let's go, Ye Fusion said, stepping into the black wind carving, and soon a group of people walked directly in the black wind carving. Many people saw them and Qianyang said, "Follow." The words fell, and the 5 strong people in Qianmeng land followed Feng Peng and others behind Ye Fusion. Facts had proven that it was right for Qian Yang to invite Ye Fusion to enter the ruins. Furthermore, he also wanted to see what Ye Fusion could get. Go. Those who got Yanzong's fire stick also followed. He is the leader of Yanzong, Xiao Mu, Yanzong's arrogant son. He has a strong talent on fire, and everyone in Yancheng obeys him. The order was like Qian Yang's status in Qianmeng land. The others also tried to communicate with the instrument, but after finding that they were not recognized as a failure, they also got up and chased in the direction of the people who had left. Only the virgin Lu Langxiu and the others were still here. Lu Langxiu's silver eyes flashed a strange color. This situation didn't happen last time. This time, everyone chose to follow Ye Fuxian, perhaps to see the three lowly people in the world get magic weapons, and many people have ideas in their hearts. The people of the desert city are also very extraordinary. The four people got their hands on magic weapons, but no one tracked them down. They may see that the four people are terrible. They are independent and don't go out with other people. Diolin Langxiu's body flashed, and she also continued on. This time, the number of people who obtained magic weapons was the largest in history. I don't know if it will cause some changes to the ruins. On the black wind carving, Ye Fuxian naturally sees everyone following them, but no matter, he is still familiar with the ancient Gukun instrument, even the instrument is unknown, how to release its power. This is Jiyu Lulan's palace. Just then, Ye Wuchen looked up and said. Ye Fuxian blinked his eyes and looked at Ye Wuchen, another palace. He glanced at Ye Wuchen's sword. This sword may contain will, like a flame of will, because he may know something about ancient times. The ancient country of Lulan is called the ancient country because the former country of Lulan was destroyed by extinction, the palace was occupied, and the powerful people of the palace were massacred. It can be said that it was devastating. The ancient Lulan collapsed, and there was an extinction. The woman was born with half the volume of treasure and revived Lulan, who is revered as the Queen of Heaven by the people of Lulan. Since then, the country has been called the Lulan Kingdom, and the Lulan Kingdom only chooses girls, no princes and princesses. Ye Wuchen said. Why does the ancient palace exist in the ancient world, and what is under it? Ye Fuxian looked down, where there were armored soldiers everywhere. Jiyu Lulan has two books, and Lulan Tianzi killed one of the invaders with one of them. He died with his enemies, and his family was destroyed. He used the power of the book to seal the palace in formation and let the will in the array. It can endure forever. At the same time, all the treasures of the Lulan royal family are hidden in this palace, and a fortress is built, so that powerful warriors can choose future generations to inherit their will. The arrays stored in the treasure book are sent to in the ancient and ancient world. The rules the ancient and ancient worlds have been tricked, so that future generations of Lulan can give it a try. So, Tianhao Fuxing Gululan has half the volume of books in it. Ye Fuxian thought about the books that Lu Lixiu had mentioned himself, and couldn't help but be curious. Moreover, all the treasures from the ancient Lulan palace were sealed in ruins. No wonder that Lulan's people came forward and succeeded. The Lulan royal family kept the ruins in their hands. Ask me who used my Gukun. Ye Fuxian said to Ye Wuchen, why would the flames care so much? Ye looked at Ye Fuxian cleanly and said, Prince Lulan Ancient. Ye Fuxian's eyes lit up and his will entered Gukun, saying, are you a prince? Yes. A voice came from a very distant voice in response to Ye Fuxian's words. Are you going to disappear after this ancient relic? Ye Fuxian asked. The other side was silent for a moment, and then said, yes, after I disappeared, you can only use your own will to motivate the willpower contained in the Gukun. Too bad, Ye Fuxian sighed. In the ruins, I will do my best to help you. Prince said. He thought that Ye Fuxian's mouth was a pity because he was unable to use his strength. Your piano will be more famous than you. Ye Fuxian said. Unfortunately, the prince can't see the future scenery. Since you are a prince, you should be familiar with this place. Take me to treasure hunting. Ye Fuxian said. Diao continued. Up ahead, there was a voice from the sky. Ye Fuxian looked down, and he saw that there was a battle platform. Many armored warriors were standing in front of the vertical war drum. They wore fire armor. A fiery breath seeped out, covering the battle platform with an ancient breath. In the center of the war drum, there is a long strip of cases, in which is placed a terrible fiery furnace. In the fiery furnace, there is a beautiful book of fire hanging there. Dong. A trembling sound came out, and the black wind let out a long beep, and the body fell unsteadily into the sky. Ye Fuxian and others also felt their heads shaking, and the sound of the drums was terrible. They landed in front of the battle platform, looking ahead, so the magic weapon was abandoned. This is really not hidden at all, is the Emperor Jiyu Lulan that much appreciated. Go. Ye Fuxian and others stepped forward, Jiyu Qin holding it in his hand, ready to break through to get the fire book. Down, do you deserve it? A cold voice came from the void, and the people below saw the situation below sharply descend. Xiao Mu's fire stick in the void even exploded into a domineering cold drink. Then, the imagination of the flames will appear again, and his eyes are fixed on the treasure book in front of him. The treasures that he couldn't get in front of him were now placed there. Get it, it will be very useful for your training, I will help you. The figure of fire said to Xiao Mu. Chapter 174, You Have My Approval. Okay. Xiao Mu nodded, and walked forward while holding the fire stick. He could naturally see that this fire book would be useful for him to train fire. Even though treasures other than the maiden name Lulan needed to be exchanged for the ancient country of Lulan, how could they not have other ideas, or at least train in the ruins first? Qi Ye Fusion and others glanced at the flame figure. How many times has it been? But he didn't act. Instead, he saw Xiao Mu moving forward onto the battle platform. Soldiers in armor in front of war drums hit war drums. A moment of horror broke. The sound of the drum vibrating in the world. There seems to be a fire of will into the drum. In that voice, go towards Xiao Mu. Xiao Mu is about to merge into the scepter, and he puts the scepter in front of him. In a moment, a curtain of terrifying flames of light enveloped his body. A terrible destruction was about to occur, and it collided with the violent will that swayed from the sound of the drum. Xiao Mu made a strong step forward to win the fire book. The people behind him did not act trivially. They could feel the power of the war drum, which was extremely terrifying. Xiao Mu took a step, the war drum sounded again. This time, it was even scarier than the first drum. Xiao Shao's brows slightly frowned, and his prince-like look appeared fiercely to spur the power of the scepter. At this moment, he, like the figure of a prince, is bathed in fire and cannot live forever. As the leader of Yuncheng city, Xiao Mu also came to the ruins after winning the prince's fortune. The power is naturally very terrible, otherwise he will not be recognized by the instrument. A wave of blazing fire rolled on the battle platform. Xiao Mu's body seemed to sink, but he used the power of the scepter to move forward. This is a battle of wills, urging the prince with his will. The wand of the magic weapon, the will that erupts, is really close to the level of the prince, and there is no reason not to get the book of fire. When he stepped forward step by step, the drum vibrated, the people behind continued to retreat, and the will trembled, especially those who were not lucky prince. They just felt that they couldn't stand this power at all. In China, there will be no profit at all. Without the prince's luck, you need to make up for it, but most people don't have it. Xiao Mu, bathing in the endless fire, stepped forward like a prince. The soldiers hit the drums again, and the drums rang, and the world seemed to resonate. Combined with the general situation of heaven and earth, they turned into an indestructible force against Xiao Mu. Swept away. Xiao Mu's footsteps stopped, and a terrifying heat wave blew through his body. His hand holding the stick trembled slightly. He was close to the book of fire, and he only needed to take 7 more steps to get it. But he developed a feeling, these 7 steps, I am afraid it is difficult to have a chance to get out. Xiao Mu raised his steps and stepped forward. Loud noises, and battle drums sounded again. In an instant, an endless firestorm blew from heaven and earth. The terrifying power was accompanied by the sound of drums hitting sticks and strikes. For Xiao Mu. Bang. With a loud bang, Xiao Mu's body was shaken by flying. He furiously pushed the power of the scepter into an eye-catching imprint, but the crack still appeared, almost broken, but he still supported it. He gasped, his face slightly pale. Fail. Everyone's eyes bulged, even as strong as Xiao Mu failed, and they still relied on the willpower of the prince, which meant they were even less likely to succeed. Behind him, the sharp man next to Lu Langxiu said, it seems that it is difficult to get it. I don't know if the people in the lonely city can do it. Over the years, the ancient Lulan people have entered the ruins for generations, and many of them have been taken away. The treasures left in the ruins at this time were extremely difficult to retrieve. This fire book, a sharp person once took it, but failed, and he went further than Xiao Mu. Lady Natural Lu Langxiu also tried it, she almost got it, but failed at the last step. Where Xiao Mu was, the fire shadow appeared on the scepter again, and his appearance was a little unsightly. Senior, I tried my best, Xiao Mu said. I know. The fire ghost nodded, it seems that no one can get it at all, it's a pity. Are the treasures in the remains of this royal palace so hard to obtain? If this is the case, I am afraid that there will be no other advantages. The people behind him sighed when they heard it, but no one was able to get it. Since the prince would say so, it must be true. But at this moment, a figure in white clothes stepped out and headed towards the battle platform, which instantly caught everyone's attention. Many people looked at him and couldn't show the strange appearance. Although Ye Fusion is talented and recognized by magic weapons, after all, he is low level and does not have a lucky prince. So he insists on using the full power of the magic weapon. What can Xiao Mu not do? He wants to try. Fire Shadow saw Ye Fusion passing by and was stunned, looked at him in surprise, and said coldly, what do you want to do? Of course try. Ye Fusion smiled at each other. Are you an idiot? Fire said nonchalantly. Both he and Xiao Mu failed to join forces. Ye Fusion, he wants to try. Is he worth a try? This is amazing. Maybe I'm lucky. Ye Fusion smiled. Uncontrollable. The figure of the fire opened coldly. Ye Fusion said nothing, and continued to move forward, the sound of the drums constantly vibrating in the eardrums. He could feel a fiery faint. Gukun was in front of him. Ye Fusion held the piano with one hand, and the other hand hit the strings, and a sound came out. At this moment, the scene is like a battlefield. For a moment, people seemed to be replaced with a mood, as if the front was really like a battlefield. Ye Fusion has not falsified the prince's wealth, but he has the imperial will and integrated it into the Gukun, which can affect the will of Prince Jiu Lulan, and motivate the strength of Gukun. Kukan's voice was long, and there was a tremendous surge of meaning, and it seemed that there were thousands of horses on the battlefield. Opposite the cymbals, the drums vibrated and turned into a terrifying momentum. The two momentums collided and disappeared together. Ye Fusion's steps are very stable, as if there is a strange law. Along with the rhythm of the piano sound, the momentum of the piano sound continues to become stronger, and every point is strong. He takes a step. With the will of the empire, he urged the will of the prince and his tools, and the momentum that erupted by the command of the general was far from what he could compare. The cymbals and drums continued to face each other, and the two momentums were terrifying to the extreme, from the weak to the strong, more and more terrifying, until everyone felt like they were on the battlefield, watching the confrontation between the two armies. It seemed that they had once again underestimated Ye Fusion. Seeing this momentum, he might catch up with Xiao Mu's steps. However, they didn't understand a bit, how was Ye Fusion's strength achieved? How can he urge the instrument in such a way? I looked at the space around Ye Fusion. The flames soared, the terrifying flames seemed to bury his body, but Ye Fusion's body was enveloped in a storm of piano sounds, destroying everything, as if by his will. The flames were always unbreakable. He was still moving forward, and gradually approached where Xiao Mu came from. This made Xiao Mu's face a little ugly, and the shadow of the flame next to him also looked at Ye Fusion. Why does he look down on Ye Fusion? Because Ye Fusion's cultivation is too low, and there is no prince's luck. Such a power field will have no achievements in ruins. However, Ye Fusion first got the magic weapon, and then took the same step as Xiao Mu here, making him feel strange. Did he leave this time? Just that. The fire figure didn't seem willing to believe that he would be wrong. He saw the sound of the drums becoming more ferocious, the momentum soaring and destroying everything. The storm was unstoppable. But he looked at Ye Fusion's finger as if he had turned into a ghost, frantically pulled out the strings, and a storm of piano sounds swept away. Under the general's command, he did not choose to continue the defense, but instead launched an attack. Search for death. The figure of fire looked at Ye Fusion's movements coldly. If he continued to steadily move forward, he might be able to take a few steps closer to the Book of Fire, but at this point his method was undoubtedly to find death. Ye Fusion naturally will not find death. He continued to move forward. Qingyan was swept away by the terrifying will, and collided with the sound of the drums. The space is like a riot, and the incomparable will is like destroying everything. Under the command of General Wu, at this moment, it seems that there are several imperial wills of piano music that bypass the attack and plunge directly into the war drum. Dong. There was another loud sound. The war drum shook the sky and destroyed everything, and the storm of piano sounds in front of Ye Fusion had disappeared. All the hits just finished. Find a path to death, said the fire figure indifferently. Ye Fusion was dead in his eyes. Others naturally also saw that this attack would really kill Ye Fusion. But at this moment, Ye Fusion raised his hand and plucked the strings. The sound of drums and echoes echoed. A violent storm erupted from the drums of war, destroying everything. The next moment, under the shocked eyes of the people, the armored soldiers and drums of cymbals scattered away. Everyone's disciples contracted and looked at the place in shock. What happened? Ye Fusion, how did he do it? The eyes of the fire figure were also frozen there, and Ye Fusion was really successful, and the armored soldiers were swept away. The Book of Fire floated there, nothing else was blocked. Xiao Xiaomu flashed, and rushed forward, ready to snatch. Ye Fusion glanced at him, and the Gukun in his hand was swung again, and the violin resonated with the war drum once again, and the voluptuous was about to be swept out. Xiao Mu's face changed greatly, accompanied by a terrifying will sweeping over. He was bored. With a buzz, his face was pale, and he paused for a moment, and he couldn't help but bleed. A figure of fire appeared next to the scepter, and his eyes were very restless. Obviously he is gone. Ye Fusion is stronger than Xiao Mu. The sound of the piano and drums resonating very strongly. You have my approval, you come to the scepter. The fire figure said, ready to release Xiaomu. Chapter 175, Strong. Flame words fell and Xiaomu's face paled instantly. He is recognized as the instrument of the prince, and it is a matter of pride, but at this time, the instrument must leave him, and one can imagine his feelings. The people behind you also show different colors, and Ye Fusion's talent is apparently approved by other princes' weapons. As long as he agrees, he can control the prince's two magic instruments, which is undoubtedly a huge increase in strength. Although the figure of the fire will not be very polite to Ye Fusion before, it is the will of the prince. Willing to help him, there is no reason not to accept him. This opportunity is very rare. The fire will stare at Ye Fusion. He naturally knew that he was not friendly before, but after all, he was a princely character who was willing to help Ye Fusion and give him his weapon. How could Ye Fusion refuse? But the rest of my life I don't think so. Before the scepter humiliated Ye Fusion several times, now it is still really fair to ask Ye Fusion to accept it. In fact, the first time he rejected Ye Fusion was very sad for the rest of his life, and it was not easy for him to contain his emotions. You deserve it. The rest of his life spoke coldly, returning what he said to Ye Fusion to the other party. The figure of the fire wrinkled, looking at the rest of his life. What did you say? The figure of fire froze coldly. The people who assist the peak of the far phase are not as good as the people of the first phase. They have the face to change their master. What do you want? The rest of his life stepped forward and said indifferently. Let him use it. You are presumptuous. The figure of fire was rebuked coldly. He was changed by the will of a prince, and greatly humiliated by a descendant of the first rank. All your life, you are not right. Ye Fusion suddenly opened his eyes, and the rest of his life in the flames will stare at Ye Fusion. Other people's eyes also fell on Ye Fusion, only to see his smile, staring at the fire. The rest of his life was easily offended, but Ye Fusion seemed to understand what to do for his good. Flame Shadow heard the satisfaction with Ye Fusion's words, and said lightly, you can rest assured that because you can have this power, if you have me, you will become even stronger. Ye Fusion looked at each other and smiled, are you okay? The fire flames will glance at you, staring at Ye Fusion, everyone is looking at him, some don't understand what he means. You're playing with me, Flame willed indifferently. Ye Fusion did not look at him, but said all his life, what do you think, even though this person has some idiots, it is better to eliminate him. After all, it is a prince-grade weapon, can't be sold. I heard Ye Fusion's words stunned for the rest of my life, then smirked, anger disappeared instantly, scratched his head and said, it seems you are right. The people around me were stunned and looked at Ye Fusion, this. Not to mention whether Ye Fusion can eliminate the other party. If it could be done, then the power of this instrument in the ruins would be greatly reduced. Is he really not going to use it? The face of the will fire will become very ugly in an instant, staring at Ye Fusion firmly, said coldly, you embarrassed me. You are too noisy, so you can disappear. Ye Fusion's words fell, and the imperial intent poured into Gukun. However, this time, the prince in Gukun seemed unwilling to cooperate, and the ghost of will was once the prince of the Lulan kingdom. Ye Fusion's eyes flashed a cold color, what if they didn't cooperate? The imperial thrust was forced by the emperor, and then the fingers flicked the strings, and the sound of the piano directly flowed into the war drum on the other side. The drum was shocking, and instantly turned into a terrible battlefield. The determined, terrifying storm sank straight into that fiery figure. You are arrogant. The figure of fire sighed coldly. He had been transformed by desire, and was burning madly at this moment, enduring the storm that came from the bombardment. Kill. Ye Fusion snorted coldly, killing words fell, the sound of the piano sounded again, the momentum rose, and the war drum shook the sky. The storm swept over, and the fire shadow roared, you are crazy. The words fell, and the power of the two storms swept over, erasing the shadow of the will flame directly. The people behind trembled and stared at the handsome white figure completely crazy. The prince's weapon that no one else can get, he directly wipes the will of others, not worth using, very proud. Remaining life, save it first. Ye Fusion smiled, the rest of his life nodded, stepped forward and kept the scepter. Xiaomu was watching beside him, but did not dare to stop, he was injured by Ye Fusion before relying on the instrument. Today, the absence of weapons is definitely not Ye Fusion's opponent, and naturally will not stop the rest of his life. Ye Fusion's body walked towards the Book of Fire, reaching out to release it. Instantly, the book of fire seemed to be a void, and a fire character floated in the air, which contained a strong will. Ye Fusion shrouded his will, and then he felt the will of fire be infused into his own will. At this time, Ye Fu was born with a strange color, and this book of flames was simply amazing. The release of the Sun Fa phase, under the guidance of willpower, the character transformed by the fire book actually merged into the Fa phase and turned into the power of the Sun Fa phase. At the same time, the fire character was also imprinted in Ye Fusion's mind. He got lucky again, and the Book of Flames is afraid that it can strengthen his strength. Everyone looked at Ye Fusion. Xiao Mu's face is the ugliest. Now he can't help Ye Fusion. After going out, think of ways for him to take off and take his luck. This Book of Flames might help the Queen Prince to become the Queen Prince, but now she was taken away by Ye Fusion. Ye Fusion looked back at Virgin Lu Langxiu, showing an apologetic smile. Can't blame him, right? Now the Book of Flames is directly integrated into the French phase, and there is no way to exchange with the ancient country of Lulan. Go. Ye Fusion said. The Black Wind Vulture immediately moved forward, and a group of people stepped on the Black Wind Vulture and continued to move forward. The people behind him saw Ye Fusion go to follow, even if there is nothing Ye can do now, at least follow him to see where he can go. Now that they can understand it, they can't get the acknowledgement of the instrument. With their own strength, do not think about the advantages in the ruins. The ancient ruins of Lulan have existed for many years. I don't know how many Tianzhou Lulan have set foot. How Qiang entered, but actually it can be taken. The ancient countries of Lulan have been taken. For the Lulan ancient kingdom, they must immediately want to obtain the relics and treasures that they have never obtained before they will invite other cities of Tianzhou to come. Looking forward to the figure on the black wind carving, no one thought that the person running in the ruins would be a person from the First Order Law country. Qianyang Zhaohar and others didn't even think that Qianyang thought that although Ye Fusion was talented, but the country was too weak, everything would be under his control. On the black wind carving, Ye Fusion will enter Gukan and ask, do you know where the treasures of the Lulan kingdom are placed? I don't know. The prince's tone seemed aloof. He doesn't want to wipe out the fire now, but Ye Fusion's power to spur him is strong. Although the spurs were much weaker under his resistance, his use of the mighty would spur the willpower on the battle drums, and the vibrations of the piano and drums instantly erased the will of the fire. Anyway, by the way, it was the will of the prince. You are too blind. The prince in Gukan looked a little unhappy. Is the prince strong? Ye Fusion said lightly, can you feel my willpower level? What level? The prince asked for a moment of silence, although he felt very strong, but he did not know the specific level. Imperial will. Ye Fusion responded to the others with an idea. The pious father had instilled many ideas into him since he was a child. He had also seen the appearance of the seniors of the Snow Ape, and had seen the true power of the emperor's will, because the prince was beyond reach in his eyes. Existence is only a condition of practice. Sooner or later he will cut the prince, Nandu Gulo Tianzi, he will kill. So many people thought he would forgive the flame figure, but he just wiped it out. Are you kidding? Said the prince. Unfortunately, I can't fully use its power, it can only be used simply, and you won't see it in the future. Ye Fusion did not argue with the other party, and said, show me the way. The Black Wind Eagle traveled a long way, there were many legions below, they were ignored. In the distance, there are faint ancient temples, like where the emperor lives. However, at this time Ye Fusion frowned, and there was a terrible breath in front of him. The sound of screaming and killing was like a terrible battle. Looks like someone broke into the temple of heaven. Ye Fusion looked ahead and said that the place where the prince took him was the core of the ancient ruins, and it should be the most dangerous place. If you say someone broke in, it must be 4 people in that deserted city. They immediately left after getting the magic weapon. Really? Moving forward, he saw a mighty figure appeared on the front steps. Many strong men wore armor, like a terrible legion. This legion even had a lot of purple gold armor in the high-level law state. However, all the generals were surrounded by figures at this moment. That figure stood in the midst of the crowd, with great majesty. He wore a simple robe, no armor, but with an earthly temperament, like a true prince. The figure looked at Ye Fusion and the others who were close. The majestic eyes showed indifference. Has anyone come to die? In that year, the emperor of the Lulan kingdom ended up with all of them, but arranged a large lineup to experience the descendants of the Lulan kingdom and hid the treasures in the formation. In that case, if there was one, they would kill one. Chapter 176, Siege. Ye Fusion stared at the figure, like the figure of a real prince. I was probably the strongest prince who entered King Lulan's palace at that time. His will is immortal in formation. This prince's strength will definitely be above the figure transformed by the flame of will. Kill. I saw the prince spoke coldly, his voice dropped, and the legionnaire stepped in at the same time, and the power of destruction condensed and was born. Break together. Ye stepped forward without dust, the sword in his hand waved, and suddenly a rain of swords appeared above the sky, heading towards the attack from below. All the attacks where the sword that the rain passed through was crushed. However, there is still a large number to kill. This army is not afraid of death at all. The rest of his life is also advancing, the huge axe is slashed, the axe cuts the void, and the armored sergeant is crushed wherever he goes. Ye Fusion sat cross-legged behind the black wind carving, kneeled Gukun, and stared at the figure of the prince in front of him. Although he already knew the level of his combat power in this relic, he did not know exactly what the current prince had. How strong. Those who followed Ye Fusion behind him also saw the scene ahead. No one came forward to fight, and the three Ye Fusion got the prince's weapon. Among them, unless the prince of the prince has the strength to fight, the rest will die if they collide with the figures of the prince level, although it is not the real prince, but the will of the prince. The first woman named Lu Langxiu and the others stood and watched quietly. Ye Fusion headed straight for the core of the ancient ruins, where the emperor used to be. Apart from Ye Fusion, the scene of the same riot in front must have sparked a war. He knew that it must be a strong person from the deserted city who had already entered it. The genius of that barren city was most likely the arrogant figure of the top forces in the eastern Badlands. They used the ancient ruins of Lulan as a test ground, and their strength was truly terrifying. Seeing the troops continue to be crushed, the prince stepped out, and a terrifying momentum spread from him. The Gen Prince's body seemed to be transformed into an illusory shadow, and he walked in the void and went straight to Ye Fusion. His will is very strong, which is transformed by the complete will of the prince. Ye's clean body flickered, and he stepped forward. His body was filled with indestructible meaning, and his sword was as high as the sky. Ignoring everything, the King Prince continued to walk in the sky of swordsmanship. He has amazing momentum. He wanted to destroy everything, and the world around him seemed to tremble and terrifying. The rest of his life also stepped forward, and the tomahawk slashed. They could feel each other's strength. The princely figure stepped towards Ye Wuchen and the rest of his attack range. On his body, blooming is extremely vicious, as if there is an endless earthprint whizzing and exploding, sweeping over everything. The sword meant to be annihilated under the palm, the axe light of the rest of life also crumbles. After all, Ye's dustlessness in the rest of the life is relatively low, and even the prince's luck has never been obtained. Normally, it is impossible to force the weapon to erupt the true prince who is about to attack. The harp sounded. Ye Fusion sat on the black wind carving and hit the strings, and all the sounds of the harp rushed straight to the figure of the prince. Wuken's voice magic, good at attacking spiritual will, has a certain restraint. However, it is seen that other people's bodies see through the illusion of light, and the terrifying light of the earth surrounds the whole body. At the same time, supergravity covers the black wind statue in people's bodies. At this time, the black wind statue is actually unable to compete with the power of will to fall. Ye Fusion's eyes flashed. Even if the real powerhouse of the prince was a will, it was still terrible. The Sundani strings continued to be strummed, the imperial intent pressed Gukun, chaos, the extremely high sound of the piano tore everything apart, and was instantly crushed by killing the palm print. King Hu Leng hummed, his body turned into a shadow, almost to the extreme, and endless palms overlapped, killing Ye Fusion, Ye Wuchen, and the rest of his life at the same time. Ye had a sword storm blowing all over his body, and the rest of his life the axe kept coming out, but he could barely block the opponent's attack. Ye Fusion lowered his head and continued to touch the piano. The music keeps going up and getting stronger and stronger. The palms from the bombardment continued to tear. A terrifying piano storm rang out around his body, destroying all will. Ignore the figure of the prince, ignoring everything and heading straight for the storm of piano sounds. With the prince's instrument, the existence of the rule of law wants to compete with him. Although he is not a real prince, but only a will, it is still enough to destroy Ye Fusion. The prince stepped directly into Ye Fusion's body piano sound storm. At this moment, Ye Fusion felt a terrible desire to oppress. Its power is almost unmatched. Although he can push with the imperial will of the instrument prince, but the strength of the will still seems to be somewhat different from the will of the true prince. At this time, he immediately urged the emperor's tactics. For a moment, his body seemed to have a strange light, like that of an emperor. The stronger emperor rushed into the Gukun. At this moment, the prince looked shocked. The willpower was pushed to the limit, and the Gukun was played with divine ideology, and the sound of the piano was raised again. The majestic glory hit the prince's body. The prince seemed to sense the threat. The reason why he dared to kill Ye Fusion directly was because he felt that the piano sound emitted by Ye Fusion could not beat him, but at this moment, the piano sound storm became even more terrifying. His body was shaking violently, and his body seemed to have become a little more illusory. But he still hadn't backed down, and he had already reached such a point. How can there be a way back? As a prince, even if he fell in the form of a will now, he still had the pride of the prince. Boom. A stronger desire to attack Ye Fusion, to destroy Ye Fusion, Diao and others has fallen into the sky, only Ye Fusion is fighting against the other party. Ye Fusion protected his body with imperial intent, but his fingers did not stagnate. A more terrifying piano sound came out, piercing the other person's body directly. The prince looked down and looked embarrassed, but his steps were as usual, oppressing Ye Fusion. Dead. Ye Fusion sighed coldly, and the melody was still lifted. He finally understood how terrible the pressure on the chaos and mountains in the school was, and he was doomed to die. The storm of cricket sound destroyed everything, penetrated the figure of the prince, and tore him a little. The illusory figure showed an unwilling look, but in the end it turned into nothingness. When the turbulent airflow disappeared, the people behind looked at the scene in shock. Ye Fusion even killed the prince, although it was only the will of the prince and the prince was really strong, it was still shaking. There was a strange color flashing in Lu Lixiu's eyes, and Ye Fusion was able to make this move, which was beyond his expectation. The legion below was still killed, but it was no longer a threat. Ye Wuchen shot with the rest of his life to kill one person. Go, Ye Fusion said. The emperor's palace is ahead, and there seems to be a riot there. Tianzhao from the deserted city has already entered it. He wanted to see what was inside. The black wind eagle descended at Ye Fusion's feet and spread its wings. He and his team continued to move forward, and the people behind him was still following closely. These guys are really annoying. The rest of his life said coldly, just following the hand. This is the character of Tianzhao from all sides. Everyone is just counting, see if they get the treasure and then they will loot. Finally, Ye Fusion came to the chaotic ground, screaming and killing his voice, and it came from all directions. Careful, Ye Fusion said. The speed of the black wind carving slowed down, and they reached the stairs at this time, and the majestic temple of heaven in front of him was there. However, the left and right sides seemed to be rioting. At this time, a terrible breath came from behind. Ye Fusion turned his head and looked back, and then he saw the extremely terrible encirclement of the army from all sides, seemed to know that they had broken here. Joint siege here. The appearance of the arrogant figures behind Ye Fusion changed, but the army was led by the prince figures, and they could not compete. As soon as the shape of the body flashes, it goes to the side, and they slip very quickly one by one. Let's go to the palace. Ye Fusion said, all here, there is no reason to back down. But at this moment, two figures flashed from each side to the left and right. Behind them, several princely figures chased and killed, all of them as fast as lightning. The four figures are really the four strong people of the desolate city. They got in here first and were surrounded. He brought people here. Ye Wuchen frowned, his eyes sharp. The four strongmen saw Ye Fusion appear and headed straight for this direction. Suddenly the princes and troops from both sides, plus the people behind them, faintly formed them. Go ahead. Ye Fusion immediately opened his mouth, and the black wind eagle rushed towards the palace like lightning. The left and right directions, the wind passed, and the four figures came to Ye Fusion and they pinched them left and right, walked side by side with them, and headed straight for the palace. Ye Fusion put the Gukun on his knees, and the man sat behind the black wind carving. Come back. Yi Jiansheng saw a strong man in the deserted city rushing forward and returning to Ye Fusion. They cut the sword broke, the sword light drowned everything, and the black wind engraved and the people above all shrouded in it. Not only that, the other three also launched attacks at the same time. With the power of the magic weapons, the four strong people joined forces, and the black wind carving stopped suddenly and even retreated. Spells disappear after the opponent forces them back. Obviously, they didn't really want to kill them, but they wanted to use it to intercept and drag the chase. A princely figure came straight to Ye Fusion, and stared coldly at the four figures who stepped into the palace in front of them. It was as if in their eyes, Ye Fusion and the others were already dead. Chapter 177, Extreme Battle. The faces of the people around Ye Fusion were all ugly, and the four strong people were chased after they were forced to retreat to block the pursuit and rushed to the palace. appearing at this time as the will of a prince. The former prince is so terrible, and now it is hard to resist. This is to kill them. Your introduction continues. I just passed. Ye Fusion laughed, and then Dia retreated above the palace, and let go of the palace gate. However, those prince figures stood there, ignoring, and behind them, an endless siege army surrounded the side. It seems that all the strong people in this palace area are under siege. At a glance, the armored army was endless. To the margins just surprising. I saw a prince wave his hand, and many armored soldiers marched forward, walking from three sides, and the void flashed. I want to completely block this palace here, and no one wants to let it go. In the distance, the people of the various armies fled furiously. They were afraid that they would be miserable before taking a step, and fortunately, the princely character did not pay attention to them, but even so, the mighty army chased after them, making them feel a tremor. I reached a great distance, looked back, and saw the vast land in front of the palace, all of which were buried by soldiers, couldn't help shaking. This should be the core of the ruins. The strongest army is gathered here. I'm afraid that whoever sets foot will die. In his vision, he could see Ye Fusion's hazy figure. They were surrounded by soldiers above the palace, and there was no way to live, for fear of death. Ye Fusion and the prince fought before they saw him. The prince was too strong. Ye Fusion did everything he could to kill him. Now, I'm afraid he won't run away. Can they get out? The sharp man next to Lady Lulan asked. In this area, it is said that the ancient country of Lulan has sent countless strong people to break through it many times. Nothing ever worked. Fall down. However, some extraordinary characters appeared in the relic, Ye Fusion, the evil one, and the top four Tianzhao of the desolate city. They had broken into the palace, and might have a chance to find half the book. Keep going back. Lu Langxiu didn't answer. She didn't know, but she was afraid that it was more powerful. Seeing the chase forward, they could only continue to move backwards. It was easy to kill these ordinary pursuit troops, but if they were caught by the princes, it would be a bit of a problem. Faced with a variety of variables, but now, you can wait and see. Above the Fuxing Palace, Ye Fusion and others have been surrounded, the rest of his life in Ye Wuchen left and right, and they are ready to fight. Everyone is giving way, so your seniors can't catch up with them just yet. Ye Fusion said depressed. All will die, just first, a prince spoke coldly. Why, I don't want a situation where the fishing net is broken. Ye Fusion said. Be quiet. Another prince spoke coldly. The fishing net died, and Ye Fusion was worth it. At this time, I saw a prince waving his hand, and the troops suddenly rushed in. All the soldiers and armored warriors all killed Ye Fusion. You solved it. Ye Fusion said. Ye Wuchen nodded for the rest of his life. The princes may not be able to handle it, but there is no problem to kill this armored army. They are both left and right. When the legion was killed, Ye Wuchen's sword and life axe was struck at the same time. For a time, it looked like a bloody storm. Ye Fusion stepped forward and sat in the palace to play the piano. The piano sound was bright. With just one piano sound, there was a momentum to pierce the sky. The Imperial Emperor's tactics worked. Suddenly, Ye Fusion enveloped an invisible power on him. He sat there, but his body permeated with a unique style. As he played, the sound of the piano continued to rise, and the heaven and earth around him seemed to be rioting for it, and the meaning of chaos and chaos permeated the heavens and earth. One armor killed the figure of the warrior furiously, and then saw the sound of the piano breaking through the gap and directly piercing their eardrums, and the gurgling sound came out one after another, and then saw that one of the shadows was shattered into nothingness. They are not really real creatures. At this time, a huge battle broke out in the palace, a breath came out, 5 figures appeared in the void, and the strong people of the 4 deserted cities surrounded one person at the same time. The man was also a prince, but his temperament was even greater. He was inspired by the power of the world empire. The prince was so powerful that he was like a high-ranking celestial figure that had to be subdued at a glance. This person was the leader who once led the army to Lulan, and the emperor of another powerful kingdom. He is guarded in the palace and no one can attack. The 4 strong people of the barren city, they are not of the same strength, but of the 4 forces, the supreme power of the eastern barren land, using the ancient ruins of Lulan as their testing ground. This was also a test to see who could capture for Lulan, ancient ruins with the strongest treasures. They all have the luck of the prince, and they are the luck of the moderate prince, plus the peak strength of the French state and the magic weapon. Their strength is really terrible, but now 4 strong men are suppressed before a prince. Staying here, the prince is so strong, holding the king's sword, which is changed by desire, like the king of killing, decapitating everything. The 24-baron city, Tianzhou, continued to move backwards, and the four of them could barely withstand each other's attacks. Come on, someone said. Looks like they can't get any treasures in this palace. There are terrible characters guarding them, and strong people outside enough to suppress them deadly. Don't even think about getting. The four fought and retreated. Although the prince was very strong, he couldn't really kill the four. The other four continued to retreat towards the side. Finally, four terrifying weapons broke out at the same time. Then, the four turned and rushed away, and the soldiers who came from the encirclement could not stop their way. The emperor wanted to chase, but even if he was killed, he was afraid that he would not be able to leave the four. Then he turned his eyes and looked away from the palace, and there were terrible piano sounds. Vaguely with a terrifying radiance, he thought, is Lu Languo's lineage so extraordinary now? When he stepped out, he also went in that direction. Ye Fuxian pressed the tool with the emperor's trick, and the rivers and mountains were a mess. At this time, the airflow in this space was raging, and several princes stepped towards him at the same time, all feeling for Ye Fuxian's terrifying voice. The sound of the attack could really threaten them. At this time, the emperor stepped forward, holding the king's sword. Ye Wuchen saw his body flickering behind him, walking like a sword, and showing endless sword intent all over his body, killing each other. Suddenly the prince hummed, compared to Kendo's will. The king monarch's sword had been cut, and it suddenly seemed to flood the room with endless sword intent. The terrifying sword light pierced through everything and headed straight for Ye Wuchen. Yan Ye gathered all his strength and stabbed towards the sword, but his kendo would still shiver and shatter, and then the silver sword in his hand shook, almost let go, and flew back. Stepped out and crossed directly from Ye Fuxian, and all the soldiers with endless armor bowed to look at him. Are you from the Lulan royal family? Tianzi looked at Ye Fuxian and asked proudly. The sound of the high-pitched violin is still the same. Ye Fuxian looked at each other, and said, no, we are not from Lulan, but the people who came to the trial. What is the end of today? So far, the emperor looked indifferent and had left 4 people. These people still want to run away. Since it's here, stay here. Tianzi said coldly. Do not force me. Ye Fuxian looked at others with a cold and arrogant gaze. Is that true? Tianzi sneered, and said, kill them. Ye Fuxian looked at the blank figure, and said, for the rest of your life, you will go to the palace to look for treasures, and you will be protected by the dust behind me. These people, I will finish it. Ye Yusheng, Ye Wuchen and the others turned their eyes. A very strong character, Ye Fuxian, he said easily. How can this be solved? Go on, trust me. Ye Fuxian continued to make sounds, as if he felt a sense of confidence in his body, nodded for the rest of his life, and made people turn into palaces. Emperor and other princes looked at Ye Fuxian. He can't be crazy, so he wants to finish it. Where is such an arrogant person? Ye Wuchen took a step back, standing behind Ye Fuxian. He is also curious, why is Ye Fuxian so confident and what is his confidence? After they left for the rest of their lives, Ye Fuxian looked at the heavenly emperor and said, predecessors refined the sword, but it is a will. If I can defeat you today, the kendo of predecessors will not be in vain. My friend's kendo talent is extraordinary and not will never be humiliated. Elderly, can you pass it down? Strange look in the emperor's eyes reveals that Ye Fuxian is not only confident, but also thinks about his wishes. Really crazy people. Ye Wuchen also showed a touch of strange color. This man let himself stay because of this idea. It's a bit bold. If he can really inherit the will of a prince, I am afraid that he can directly obtain the will of a prince. Glanced at Ye Fuxian indifferently, then did not respond, then waved his hand, and a prince suddenly stepped towards Ye Fuxian. I am afraid that the suppression power of the ultimate willpower descends and overwhelms everything. Seniors think about me, kendo inheritance, why can't there be another way? Ye Fuxian said. Then, he lowered his head, the deception of the emperor in his body was madly stirred, and a thunderous sound came out. His blood seemed to be roaring and boiling, and a terrifying emperor mark appeared on his body. Fuxian at this moment, his body seemed to be burning, and the aura of the heavens and earth around him rushed towards his body in a panic. A terrifying light shook, and mixed with the Qiyun prince, just like Shenhua. At this moment, Ye Fuxian was sitting cross-legged like an emperor. Application. Chapter 178, The Sun and the Moon. In the battle in the East China Sea, the will of the mysterious emperor appeared in the body. The will of the emperor helped him to kill the existence of the heavenly position, but it was not his strength. But the emperor's will taught him the emperor's tactics. From then on, he could use the emperor's tactics to urge the imperial will hidden in his body. Ye Fusion knew that Emperor Zhu could raise all his attacks to the next level, but he had never fully erupted this kind of power, pushing Emperor Zhu to the limit. However, today, in the face of the siege of many princes, he knew that even if he could not defeat the others with the help of the Emperor's will in his body, because the strength in the body had completely erupted, the Emperor's tactics were pushed to the extreme without any conditions. Donghai City's familiarity from the war came, but last time, there was a mysterious will to guide him to control it, but now, it is really his own strength, of course, much stronger than Donghai City. If the opponent is really a princely character, he considers himself mortal. No matter how prince, he will also die. Willpower can greatly increase a practitioner's fighting power, but it is impossible to ignore a gap in the world. However, in the ancient ruins of Lulan, the other party is not a true prince, but the incarnation of the will. In this ancient world, no matter how strong the will, the level of his own strength can still be limited to the state of law, not to mention the other body. This will be scored, so as long as you can beat your opponent at will level, you can control your opponent. That was why Ye Fusion was so confident. Although he did not understand the will of the prince, he tried his best to press the will of the empire and returned to the will of Gukun to launch an attack. He believed that the will to attack was stronger than the opponent. Emperor marks erupted on the body. Ye Fusion's body seemed to have undergone some kind of metamorphosis. Ye Wachan behind him watched his body change in shock. He realized that maybe this was his true self, without cover. As if born as an emperor. The prince in front of him also froze, staring intently at Ye Fusion's figure. What level of will is this? At this time, the handsome figure in front of them is too beautiful. Even if they are princes, they still need to worship. He must be high, and be worshipped by the people of the world. This temperament, like desire, is not at all born after birth, it is born. Looks like you really aren't Lulan. The emperor looked at Ye Fusion and sighed. There would be no such person in Lulan. Seniors planned to stop here. Ye Fusion looked to the other side. I looked at him that day, and then looked away. There was a hint of tiredness in his eyes. It had existed in the ancient ruins for many years and had been his opponent's chess piece in the past. He was used to test Jiu Lulan's bloodline. Of course, he is not reconciled, so as long as he dares to enter, he will kill. Since he wanted to make him a chess piece, then he would kill all of Lulan's descendants. But he was tired, just an obsession. Not. He withdrew his gaze and looked at Ye Fusion. You lose, you die, you win, you get everything you want. Okay. Ye Fusion lowered his head and didn't say anything else. The piano sound stayed high, and he kept pulling it. For a moment, a brute force of will swept across the piano, and everywhere he went, all the armor shattered the figures. Emperor Tianzi waved his hand, a princely figure killed forward, carrying the will of a terrible prince, while oppressing Ye Fusion at the same time. I saw that Ye Fusion of Fucking was very calm, with a hint of tragic meaning in the sound of the piano, like the tragedy of Shi Gong in the Nandu family, but now this tragedy is not for himself, but for each other. The prince who was in the form of a will would be held back by him, not even as threatening as Tianzhao from the deserted city. After all, the other party is also the pinnacle of the law, and has the will of the prince, not the pure will. As Ye Fusion predicted, the piano sounded like the imprint of the emperor, breaking through the will of the princes, and immediately leaving a mark of destruction on their will. The princes came forward staring at their bodies, their eyes dull. Bang, bang. There were holes in their bodies, without blood, but they could feel death drawing near. Of course, they had already died once, but this time, they would probably disappear completely. Emperor looked at the scene calmly, looking very calm. Did this tragic piano sound play out for them? Leaning forward, he walked in front of the princes. Around his body, a whistling sword appeared as if it was real. When he stepped in, Wang Jian followed. At this moment, he seems to be the prince in the sword. Countless sharp swords shot away at the same time towards Ye Fusion, and opened one word at a time, killing everything in front of them. Ye Fusion quietly stroked the piano. The sound of the piano is like the 9 days of the crane, and a loud piano storm sweeps out. Wherever he went, the sword shadows were all annihilated and turned to dust. At the same time, there is a piano sound that ignores everything and directly hits the character of the day. The most terrifying pleasure of a piano attack is the difficulty of defending. The dazzling emperor mark seems to be burning in the other's body, as if it has a golden flame, very beautiful. Are you holding back? He muttered, not expecting that in the ancient ruins, he would be controlled by someone else's will. This is truly a timeless story. Someone in the first order law realm was holding back his will. As a will body, he is only controlled by a will. How can he fight? not as good as the stronger French. The tragic sound of the piano was still there, the storm blew, drowning everything, and I saw that the prince's body was burning with the emperor's will. Then, their bodies gradually became illusory, and finally became dust and disappeared, as if they never existed. Also, Ye Fusion did not continue to attack, Qin Yin became gentle, he looked up, his clean eyes stared at the blank figure. His talent is really as strong as you say. The figure asked, calmly, not at all like a life and death opponent. The fourth level of the law phase realm was approved by the Hehao prince, and his future will never stop at Hehao, Ye Fusion said. You are confident. Tianzi said, he is a very powerful prince, and naturally knows how difficult it is to be a prince. Does that senior believe me? Ye Fusion asked again. The figure in the empty space was silent. Seeing Ye Fusion, he understood what Ye Fusion meant. Gaze looked at Ye Wuchen, and he said, don't fight back. Ye looked at the blank figure and nodded. Next, the figure gradually became illusory, like a boundless illusory sword, and shot straight at Ye Wuchen, piercing from his brow. At this moment, Ye Wuchen's eyes closed, and the intimidating sword-like flow in his body grew stronger. Ye Fusion saw the smile in this scene, the imperial intent in his body disappeared, he only felt very weak, could not lift a trace of strength, and completely inspired the emperor's tactics. All of his strength was evacuated. Support the figure in the empty space gradually became unreal, and the image of that celestial body could disappear at any time. What's that? At this moment, Ye Fusion's eyes flickered. When the emperor's body became unreal, a light appeared on his body, from which there was a faint chill. I said, beat me, you will get what you want. The emperor looked at Ye Fusion Road, his voice dropped, the ghost slowly disappeared into the air, all went to Ye Wuchen, the sky, the crack of voice came out, that year, Lulin died, not a war crime. His voice dropped, and his body disappeared completely. However, in the void, half the volume of the book floated in the air, and the book was filled with a terrible chill. Ye Fusion now understood the true meaning of the other party's words. It turned out that the treasure book was in the body that day. Only by exterminating it could he obtain half of this book. Goodwill. Ye Fusion felt a chill and couldn't help but shiver and watch the thoughts freely. At this time, Ye Fusion only felt that a stronger one would seep from the treasure book and possess the emperor. He vaguely felt that the will contained in this half of the book was probably above the will of the princes, and was left by the powerful people above the princes. This chill spread a little, frost appeared between the heavens and the earth. After a while, Ye Fusion's long hair and eyebrows were covered with frost. He saw the magnificent picture in the treasure book was a vast and endless snowy mountain. This snowy mountain fell with snow and fell in the sky. Just looking at it gave off an extreme cold feeling. Over the snow-capped mountains, the cold moon hung, this month seemed colder than the snow-capped mountains. The whole picture gives people the feeling that they are lonely and cold. Around Ye Fusion's body, snowflakes also seemed to fall. These snowflakes merged into his body, and the endless water aura between heaven and earth rushed into his body and continued to enter him. In the palace of fatality, the ancient trees of the world made toys. This ancient tree also seems to be covered with a layer of ice. Above the ancient trees, gradually, a cold moon gradually formed and hung above the sky. But on the other side of the moon, the soul of the sun hangs high. The next day, the moon and moon shone on each other, with the sun as yang and the moon as yin. One fire, one water, one yin and one yang arose. Outside, Ye Wuchen received the inheritance of the will. When his eyes opened, his body was covered in a layer of ice. Looking around, the soldiers in front all froze and turned into ice sculptures. The whole world looks like to be turned into a frozen world. Even if they were Lulin girls in a very faraway place now, they felt it, and a chill continued to spread over them. Lu Langxiu stretched out her hand, and the snowflakes fell, her heart trembled. Go. Flashing in form, Lu Langxiu rushed forward, half the volume of the book, most likely appeared. Chapter 179, Crisis. The meaning of the frozen seal continued to spread, covering the entire ruins. The endless armor turned all the soldiers into ice sculptures, and then made a clicking sound, which broke and disappeared. Not only that, many buildings also began to crumble, and then disappeared into nothingness, as if the ruins of a palace originally existed. But there are still some real things, such as artifacts that contain the will of the prince, and treasures in this ruin. Moreover, the will of the princes in the instrument all felt that they were about to disappear. Matrix disintegration method. Where Ye Fusion and Ye Wuchen were, the palace around them collapsed, like the disappearance of an illusion. In the half-volume book floating in the void, the strong will continued to penetrate Ye Fusion's body, causing Ye Fuxian to have a terrible chill around him. I will disappear. At this time, a voice suddenly sounded from Gukun, I will leave you the remaining will. The words of the symbol fell, and the will in Gukun also pointed at Ye Fuxian. Ye Fuxian had used it to play the chaotic mountain before. He was surprised, maybe as Ye Fuxian said, it was the imperial intention. Two kinds were about to enter Ye Fuxian's body, but at this moment he suddenly opened his eyes and glanced at the surrounding situation. Tianzi Zingong collapsed and disappeared. He faced Ye Wuchen and said, get out of here quickly. The sound of the words fell, the wind blew violently, and the treasure book was pointed at him, and was immediately put away. The black wind rang got his will to order to fly here quickly. No dust, help me. Ye Fuxian said. Ye's eyes lit up, and he looked at Ye Fuxian with surprise, then stepped forward and stepped towards the black wind carving. Ye Wuchen asked, exceeding the body limit. The fight that only Ye Fuxian has in his eyes now, such a desire is terrible, like burning everything in Ye Fuxian's body, whether it is will, spiritual power and spiritual power, all will burn, turn into an invincible will and eliminate the kings. How can I leave without paying the price? Ye Fuxian said, and the rest of his life, Yunqing Mo, and others were quite shocked to see what had happened here. Ye Fuxian really did it, erasing all the princes. Moreover, the ruins crumbled, causing the ruins to collapse. For the rest of their lives in the palace, they naturally feel the spread of freezing ice. They know that what Ye Fuxian has obtained may be extraordinary and directly cause consequences at this time. The black wind carving spread its wings and flashed towards the front. Now this place does not mean staying for long, especially at this time Ye Fuxian lost his fighting power. He had exhausted all his strength in the war now, otherwise it would be impossible to deal with those princes. But the black wind carving was stopped a moment before. There were 4 figures in front of him from different directions, which directly cut through the black wind carving, which was the former locomotive of the desolate city. After the 4 of them were chased away by the prince, they gave up here, knowing that there was no hope, but then they felt the meaning of the ice and saw the collapse of the ruins, so they guessed something and immediately returned. At this time, all 4 eyes were on Ye Fuxian and others, showing expressions of surprise. They never thought that they would be forced to retreat to block Ye Fuxian's princes. They were able to make the princes disappear and the ruins collapse. Even though they didn't know exactly how Ye Fuxian did it, it was definitely not easy. How did you do that? Someone asked curiously. These people who practice in the field of law that are lacking have actually made those princes disappear. The power of the emperor is so strong that they are taught that, so strong, Ye Fuxian can't beat them, unless the ruins are destroyed in other ways, those princes will die. Ye Fuxian they ignore. I saw the others smiling, and said, it doesn't matter how you do it. Give me all the treasures you get. I even broke the mighty prince for them, so who else will be their opponent in the ruins here? In the other direction, Madame Lulin and others rushed over here and saw the view of the deserted city frowning, but they didn't really care about it. Madame Lulin, maybe for the people around Lulin city. Impossible, but to them, it's just a pretty talented beauty. Compared to Lulin's identity and strength, they are even more attracted to Lulin's beauty, with silver-haired white eyes, and extremely temperamental. Out of color. In the direction behind Lu Langxiu, the strong people of all parties also rushed here. They all realized that the collapse of the ruins was probably the most important treasure. In addition, after the ruins collapse, the will in the prince's artifact will disappear. Without the will of this prince's artifact, the power of the artifact can only be reduced by their own spiritual will, which will never decrease. They were very strong before, in this case, they still have hope, although the hope is still thin. There are also smart people who don't leave, but immediately turn the other way. For example, Qianyang, he knows how many people come from the deserted city, and Lu Langxiu is not easy. Ye Fuxian was very passive at this time, watching the eyes of the strong people who came. He has no combat power now, and the world without dust and the rest of his life is still low. He didn't have the ability to compete with these people. Give it up. At this time, an indifferent voice came out, but it was a sharp man beside Lu Langxiu, with a golden light in his eyes, looking at Ye Fuxian and others. If Rubao appears, King Lulingu's room must be obtained, but it is the treasure you want. When Tianhu revived Lulin with half the treasure book volume, he always wanted to get the complete treasure book volume. Many people speculated that when the 2 book volumes were combined into one, they might even have a chance to influence the Queen of Heaven during the princely days. It could be that, from then on, the ancient country of Lulin would compete in the middle of the Ludong wasteland and dominate the East wasteland. Ye Fuxian frowned, glanced at the sharp man indifferently, then looked at Lu Langxiu and said, I promise the girl will do it. Will the girl promise me? He said that he was willing to exchange with Lu Langxiu, and the treasure book appeared. He had a lifelong vision and acquired a strong will. It was also worth the trade-off, not to mention that he had no choice in the current situation. But Ye Fuxian can never hand over the treasure book first. After the treasure book is handed over, there will be no chips. Diao Lanlinzu glanced at Ye Fuxian and said, protect them. Yes. The people behind him flickered in form, and the virgin Lu Langxiu and the sharp man also moved. They went to Ye Fuxian and looked at the 4 strongest men in the eastern desert. Lu Langxiu said, you get I don't want to ask for things in Lulan. I allow you to take it and you can go. Do you think you can stop it? One of them looked at Lu Langxiu and said, 4 of them are holding magic weapons, and the prince's luck level is shaking, and the breath on their bodies is terrible. You are careless, the sharp man said coldly, this is King Lulan's palace. So what? Another person took a step forward while holding Thunderwood strong, bathing endless thunder light all over his body, and the Thunderwood magic weapon in his hand drew the thunder aura between heaven and earth like thunder. Arrays. The sharp man gave a cold drink, his voice dropped, and immediately behind him a group of top-level French realms stepped forward, all of them holding instruments. Although they were not princely instruments, they were also filled with a terrifying sharpness. Breath as if it was the same metal practitioner. They stood in a special orientation, as if in a formation, endless golden attribute light converging in the same direction, within which an extremely terrifying golden pattern appeared, exuding extreme sharpness. Hum. The strong man holding the Thunderwood continued to move forward, and the far face appeared behind him, but it was a huge thunder image, like a thunder god who came to the world, not forever. A fierce thunder spell bloomed, and an endless purple light appeared between the heavens and the earth, like a thunder robbery, killing the opposite. The strong people in the battle line shouted in unison, but there was a terrible trend. The golden pattern released a terrifying light, turning it into a golden light curtain, blocking the thunder power of the mad bombardment. The completed battlefield can be imagined how powerful they are. They were strong people that the ancient country of Lulan cultivated for relics, from generation to generation. The other 3 barren cities, Tianzhou, are also moving, and their breath is very scary. The sharp man next to Lu Langxiu and the 2 behind him stepped forward at the same time. The 3 of them actually wielded magic weapons, which once existed in these ancient ruins. Got it, the strongest of the 3 handheld instruments against one. Lu Langxiu holds the frozen stick, it is naturally also a magic weapon. His silver hair flies, the surrounding world looks like a frozen world, his silver eyes stare at the strong on the opposite side, a terrible blizzard sweeps to freeze everything. However, at this time, there is still one person in Tianzhou from the deserted city. The sword bearer has a cold smile in his eyes, his body flashes, and he shoots like a sharp sword. He went straight to Ye Fuxian and the others. And go. Diao Langxiu frowned, and the 4 in the barren city were very strong. One of them is the lone top Tianzhou, and they can only block 3. Wang Gongkang is coming, just hold on for a while. Lu Langxiu said. As soon as her voice fell, she was overwhelmed by the attacks and didn't have time to take care of Ye Fuxian. Go. Ye Fuxian said, and then a lot of Zhang Fei appeared in his hand, and he threw it straight ahead. These magic maggots turned into a powerful spell attack and headed straight for the killer figure. Want to block it. However, he saw Ye Fuxian's continuous act of law, but instead of attacking, he covered the black wind carving body, which is the law of the wind. The wind blew, and the black wind vulture rushed into the distance. The blade flickered. This method should be the pinnacle of the law. The item that escaped was well prepared, but in front of it, it was useless. The magic tool sword floated right in front of him, he stepped on the flying sword and flew forward like lightning, and left. The figure behind the black wind eagle saw this looked very unsightly. At this time, Ye Fuxian stepped forward directly, left the black wind eagle and chased after the figure, saying, you go first. Chapter 180, Broken Arm. No dust. Ye Fuxian's face changed instantly. Chi's dust-free 4th order method phase was modified, but the other side was the peak method phase. Both of them had magical instrument swords. Although Ye Fuxian has inherited the will of the prince, the other party is also the Prince of Fortune. On the contrary, Ye Fuxian was crushed and had no chance of winning. However, at this moment, Ye Fuxian left without hesitation, and it is very possible to die here. Stop. Ye Fuxian gave orders to Haifeng Diao. Don't stop, go. For the rest of his life, he screamed, his eyes reddened, and stared at Ye Fuxian's figure. To him, Ye Fuxian's life is higher than everything. If he used his own life to change, he wouldn't hesitate. The top Tianzhao figures of the deserted city, Wang Hoqian, and the top magic weapons, they really can't compete. The black-winged eagle made a long beep, and then continued to spread its wings, disobeying Ye Fusion's orders for the first time. Ye Fusion has red eyes in his eyes, is this the scene again? Very familiar. I saw that he was continuously releasing maggots, and frantically coating around the body of the black-winged carving, causing them to rush towards the Lulan city palace. The ruins have collapsed. Lu Langxiu said that there would be a strong person in the palace. Find someone. When Ye Wuchen descended from the black-winged carving, his prince would erupt in his body, revealing a terrifying sword. These swords are everywhere, and overwhelm magic weapons. Then, his body seemed to move forward. Turned into a sword, mixed with magical instruments, and turned into a hole. At this moment, an unshakable momentum seemed to kill the enemy in front of him. Li Doin looked at Ye Wuchen, who was killed in front of him. There is a hint of irony in his appearance. People in the fourth state should be compared to him. I just want to die. The sword was like the wind, and as fast as a shadow. Sharp as a sword. He seemed to be transformed into a sword ghost and instantly killed Ye Wuchen's dazzling sword. Wherever he went, the sword would make way for him. Couldn't stop his path at all. Just a moment later, he killed Ye Wuchen in front of him. Both are indifferent. In that momentum, they seemed to contain the true meaning of Kendo. Suddenly, the two instrument swords collided, the sword points intersected, and a terrifying sword sound exploded in all directions. Although Ye Wuchen's territory was much worse than Li Daoyuan's, the two sides were princes. Under the will of the urgent instrument, the gap can still be narrowed. For Ye Wuchen, the increase was even greater. Without the prince's will and instruments, he would not be able to endure a single blow. But even today, he still couldn't compete with Li Doin. As soon as the swords touched, Ye Wuchen's body quickly retreated, and the two seemed to turn into a straight line. Li Daoyuan's sword gas pressed wildly towards Ye Wuchen, and the action in the void was like an afterimage. Among the mighty swords, Ye Wuchen gathered endless swords, and his left hand extended forward. Between the 5 fingers, as if the endless swords were gathering, the prince's will erupted and pierced the figure in front of him. I don't know if I live or die. Li Doin said coldly, his sword sliced into Ye Wuchen's sword, like Xingyun Liushui, the peerless Jianha, cutting straight into Ye Wuchen's hand. I am too fast, the sword is very fast, not to mention Li Daoyuan's sword. As soon as he heard it, he saw his arm moving together with Zhang Wang, and he was directly cut, and blood came out. However, Ye Wuchen didn't seem to have any feelings. Even when his arm was severed, a small silver sword shot out in the middle of his brow. Endless Kendo will be integrated into this little silver sword at this time. Faster than lightning, shooting at Li Doin. As if the sword killed by the arm was just a fake move, he seemed to hope that the arm would be abolished. The Battle of Zhangjiu is a very dangerous battle, between victory and defeat. Li Daoyuan's sword is fast, and Ye Wuchen's sword is slow, especially at such a close distance. When Li Doin cut off his arm, his body even stopped retreating, and the silver sword was like a light, directly piercing Li Daoyuan's eyebrows. What kind of character Li Doin was, when he cut off Ye Wuchen's arm, he realized the danger. The horror-like Kendo will explode in the eyebrows, protecting the eyebrows. When the silver sword stabbed, his brows seemed to swallow an endless sword. Angry, the bodies of the two men seemed to freeze in the void, and time seemed to stop. Doin's eyebrows flashed blood, he shouted furiously, and a sword shadow appeared behind him. The silver sword in his brow was blown away by a violent sting, and then the endless sword light was killed towards Ye Wuchen. Ye held the sword cleanly. The sword was like rain, blocking all the sword light, and the body was retreating. You actually used your own arm as bait. Li Daoyuan's face was embarrassed, and the endless sword twisted his eyebrows. He was injured, and was actually injured by a fourth-order man with a fourth-order method. Ye Wuchen did not respond to the other party, and turned around and walked away, very firm. He knows that his strength is not that of the other parties, because he teases the enemy with his arm and hesitates to break his arm. But a broken arm is better than losing his life. Doin closed his eyes, the sword spirit remained, and he continued to repair the injured area. After a while, he opened his eyes, and his body shot again in the air, like lightning, reaching the limit. His eyes were very strong. He wanted Ye Wuchen to die, not just Ye Wuchen, those people had to die. Ye Fusion is at this moment close to the palace, and the ruins are collapsing. This place isn't quite right, but it's actually not great. In the distance, the line of figures flickered, and their temperaments were all extraordinary. Wearing the Lulan armor, the person led by them was extraordinary. When they saw Ye Fusion and others come straight here. The treasure book is with me. Ye Fusion said directly, and the people stopped, and saw Ye Fusion said, I have promised to exchange with the girl, and now some people are dealing with the girl and my friend who wants to rob the book treasure, follow me. After the words fell, Haifeng Diao quickly returned. Even though the truth is unknown, people still follow. Let's see if it's right or wrong. For a moment, Ye Wachan also came in this direction, but his left arm was empty, blood stained his shirt, and it was shocking. Ye Wachan. Lin Yao's face was a little pale, but Ye Wachan, Tianjiao's most talented man, had broken his arm. However, when he saw Ye Wachan's expressionless face, he walked straight to Black Wind Carving and saw the arrival of the Lulan royal family. He said, the people who kill and kill are very strong. Can you cope if you are not under your saint? The person who was led by other people's eyes blinked and said, I need to find out whether it is true or not. Ye Fusion took out a treasure book, and suddenly a cold chill enveloped him, saying, the treasure book is here. If you ask the girl later, you will know whether it is right or wrong. If you come, you are a barren city. If you are taken away, think of the consequences yourself. The man led by Jai showed a serious face and said, someone will come later. I will lead someone to block the pursuit. You go to the palace first. He said he ordered some people to escort. Of course, he also had the intention of preventing Ye Fusion from escaping by deception. Okay. Ye Fusion nodded, and a group of people from the palace continued to move forward, and behind him, a terrifying sword came directly here, and it was Li Doin who chased and killed him. The people in the ancient country of Diolinlan looked dignified and very strong, they waved their heads, and immediately led people to kill to the front. The person who stopped me is dead. Li Doin said coldly, the far face bloomed, and the endless Jiangwang exploded. The figure rushing towards him was instantly pierced through by the thought of the sword, and instantly died. Ye Fusion looked coldly at it, and continued to use the front of the falcon. This time before entering the ancient world, he brought many eagles in the Kangye kingdom, especially the falcon to prevent the situation. He looked at Ye Wachan's broken arm, his face shining with an extremely cold killing mind. Why? Ye Fusion asked. Although Ye Wachan was furious when he broke his arm, in reality he understood that Ye Wachan was able to temporarily intercept each other and escape on his own. It was very rare for him to go out at that time, and probably lost forever. It is better to die alone than to die many people. Ye Wachan's answer was simple and sounded reasonable, but before life and death, who would want to change his life for someone else? The kind of decisiveness when he stepped out, like his sword, was simple, straightforward, and decisive. People who think like this are rare. Perhaps this is how he was able to take the 13 steps of death in the prince's cave and use the fourth order method. The royal reason is recognized by the instrument. Your arm. Ye Fusion looked at Ye Wachan's hand, does not affect the use of the sword. Ye Wachan is very calm, Ye Fusion doesn't say much, but he has identified something in his heart. He will be a brother later. The rest of his life looked at Ye Wachan and said, this arm, he will pay for it with his life. Lin Linyao and Yunkan Mo and others watched the scene quietly, they didn't say anything. Lin Yao knew very well that even though she was the first beauty of the Kangye kingdom, Ye Fusion and the rest of her life had always been far from her. Maybe at first he was a little at peace and thought Ye Fusion was too proud, but with Ye Fusion he showed his talent again and again for the rest of his life, and he understood why such a distance was born. They are not worldly people. Even he feels that in the eyes of the rest of his life, only Ye Fusion is his belief, and he needs to maintain his existence. Even if it was Ye Wachan, the rest of his life had a sense of distance from him. But today's crisis, said from the rest of his life, he understood that the sense of distance would no longer exist. He suddenly thought a lot at this moment. The top 3 people in the Kangye Guo Fenhua ranking made Nan Dao Guo embarrassed by the Wind Party. The top 3 characters also set off a storm in the ancient world and made the peak of the world outside. Tianzhou is overshadowed. When they unite, what kind of magic will they create in the future? I'm probably thinking about it now, I could never have imagined it. The king's palace appeared in front of us, and the more powerful poured out. After understanding the situation, they headed to the other side. This crisis should be temporarily relieved. Li Doin won't be able to enter Lulan Palace.